Well, the big story we are bringing for you today, all day on News 9, comes to be from India and Kiwis that come face to face, and it's not for cricket. In fact, India and New Zealand signed the free trade agreement today. We tell you what to expect. Moving on, it's a cruel summer ahead. 95 of the hottest 100 cities are in India. Mercury set to rise further beyond 45 degrees Celsius. India is at the global epicenter of a heat wave. And no taking the heat away from the stock markets. Investors confront weak FY27 guidance. Inflation worries depreciating rupee and FII exodus. We get you an expert perspective on the show. You're watching Morning Brief at 9. You're watching Morning Brief at 9 this Monday morning. A quick look at all the headlines we're tracking for you. India-New Zealand free trade agreement to be signed today. New Zealand Prime Minister Christopher Luxon calls it a once-in-a-generation pact, as Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal says it will boost exports, jobs and market access. Iran Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi returns to Islamabad as Pakistan intensifies efforts to revive Iran-US ceasefire talks, while permanent deal remains uncertain. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump says Iran can contact Washington for talks if they want to, but warns Tehran must never get nuclear weapons as US cancels Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner Islamabad visit. World leaders react with shock after a shooter attempted to storm a high-profile media gala attended by US President Donald Trump, with no casualties reported after swift intervention by security forces. US President Donald Trump cites the White House press gala shooting incident to renew calls for constructions of a secure White House ballroom, arguing it would prevent such threats in the future. Trump says the suspect behind the White House press gala attack authored an anti-Christian manifesto as investigators probe motive in a high-profile case. Elon Musk's lawsuit accusing OpenAI of abandoning its non-profit mission heads to trial, pitting the world's richest person against a startup he once backed and now competes with in the booming AI sector. The US Federal Reserve is widely expected to keep interest rates unchanged as high energy prices and supply disruptions from the Iran war weigh on Washington's economic outlook. And India becomes the epicenter of global heat wave as 95 of the world's 100 hottest cities are in the country. Temperatures cross 40 degrees Celsius in many regions and near 45 degrees in parts of North, Central and East India. The big story we're tracking for you right here on News 9. More than 4 months after concluding negotiations, India and New Zealand are now set to sign a landmark free trade agreement today. The deal is aimed at doubling bilateral trade and unlocking fresh investment opportunities. The pact will be signed at Bharat Mandapam in the presence of Commerce Minister Piyush Goyal and New Zealand's Minister for Trade and Investment, Todd McClay. Now, the agreement is being seen as a major strategic win for India, especially at a time when global trade remains uncertain due to ongoing geopolitical tensions and supply chain disruptions. Now, under the pact, New Zealand has committed to invest $20 billion in India over the next 15 years across sectors such as manufacturing, infrastructure, services, innovation and job creation. Now, for Indian businesses, the deal offers duty-free access to New Zealand markets and opens new opportunities in pharmaceuticals, medical devices and services exports. A key highlight is easier regulatory approvals for Indian pharma products, with New Zealand agreeing to accept inspection report from globally trusted regulators such as the US FDA, European Medicine Agency and the UK MHRA. Now, this is expected to reduce compliance costs and speed up market access for Indian exporters. The services sector too gets a major boost. New Zealand will introduce a temporary employment visa pathway for 5,000 Indian professionals annually, allowing stays of up to 3 years. Now, this includes skilled workers in IT, engineering, healthcare, education and construction, along with Indian chefs, yoga instructors, Ayush practitioners and music teachers. At the same time, India has protected politically sensitive sectors. No tariff concessions have been offered on dairy products such as milk, cheese, yogurt and whey. Several agricultural products, including onions, sugar, edible oils and rubber, have also been kept outside the agreement to safeguard domestic farmers and India's MSMEs. New Zealand, meanwhile, gains wider access for exports such as sheep meat, wool, coal, wood products, wine, kiwi fruit and apples. The pact also includes cooperation in agri-tech with plans to help Indian farmers improve productivity, post-harvest management and food safety standards. The agreement targets doubling bilateral trade to $5 billion within 5 years. It also marks another step in India's aggressive trade push following recent FTAs with the UAE, Australia and the United Kingdom. New Zealand Prime Minister Christopher Luxon has announced a landmark free trade deal with India, calling it a once-in-a-generation opportunity for New Zealand businesses. Luxon said the agreement will improve access for Kiwi exporters to one of the world's largest and fastest-growing markets. He added that the deal will help New Zealand tap into India's rapidly expanding middle class and place the country on equal or better footing than global competitors already active in the Indian market.
We're signing a free trade deal with India that opens one of the biggest markets in the world to Kiwi exporters. It's a once-in-a-generation agreement that gives New Zealand exporters unprecedented access to 1.4 billion people, and an economy that's set to become the third largest in the world, and it puts New Zealand exporters on an equal or better footing to our competitors, and it opens the door to India's rapidly expanding middle class. Look, 1 in 4 of our jobs in New Zealand are already linked to trade, and this FTA means more jobs on New Zealand farms and orchards. It means more money coming into local communities, and it means more opportunity for your family to get ahead. And a stronger economy means that we can invest in the roads, the schools, the hospitals and police, all the services that New Zealanders rely on. This is a big win for New Zealand, and it makes it easier for Kiwis to sell more of what we're great at to the world. Kiwi fruit from the Bay of Plenty, wine from Central Otago, seafood, meat, honey right across the country. Exports underpin our economy, and enabling these sectors to compete on the world stage means supporting jobs, higher wages and economic growth. And that means more money in Kiwis' back pockets.
And on the Indian side, Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal said the free trade agreement with New Zealand will create major opportunities for Indian businesses, including leather exporters from Agra. Goyal, who was visiting the city with Todd McClay, held discussions with industry representatives from sectors such as leather and sports goods ahead of the landmark pact.
भारत और न्यूजीलैंड के बीच बड़े पैमाने पर व्यापार भी बढ़ाने का एक साधन बनेगा। लगभग 100% जो भारत से सामान न्यूजीलैंड जाते हैं वो बिना कोई कर के, बिना कोई इंपोर्ट ड्यूटी के वहां पे पहुंच पाएगा। नए मौके मिलेंगे हमारे आगरा के चमड़ा व्यापार को, हमारे आगरा के विश्वकर्मा को, आगरा और उत्तर प्रदेश के अलग अलग जो हैंडलूम और हैंडीक्राफ्ट, वन डिस्ट्रिक्ट वन प्रोडक्ट के सामान बनाने वाले हमारे कारीगर हैं, जो हथकरघा हैं, उन सब के लिए ढेर सारे अपार नए अवसर खोलने वाला ये फ्री ट्रेड एग्रीमेंट
known by people all over the world. Can I show the appreciation of the government of New Zealand to Prime Minister Modi and my great friend Minister Goyal, the friendship they have shown New Zealand. The free trade agreement that we will sign tomorrow in New Delhi is significant. It is one of the best in the world. It was the fastest negotiated. We've shown everybody all around the world when the two like-minded countries come together, great things can happen for our citizens. To everybody in India, you're so welcome in New Zealand. It's a beautiful place to visit. And I know when we send the pictures home of the beautiful Taj and people learn about the history, every New Zealander will want to get on an aeroplane and come here to make friends with India.
All right, moving on now to the war in West Asia. Iran has reportedly sent a fresh proposal to the United States through Pakistani mediators, focusing first on reopening the strategically vital Strait of Hormuz and ending the ongoing conflict in West Asia, while delaying nuclear negotiations to a later stage. According to Axios, Tehran wants immediate attention on restoring regional stability before discussing its nuclear program. The proposal comes as peace efforts remain stalled. US President Donald Trump said Iran could contact Washington if it wishes to negotiate, but repeated that Tehran must never obtain nuclear weapons. Now, tensions reportedly rose after the US cancelled a planned visit by envoys Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner to Islamabad, signaling dissatisfaction with Iran's earlier response.
You probably heard that we canceled the trip. We have all the cards. We're not going to spend 15 hours in airplanes all the time going back and forth to be giving a document that was not good enough. And so we'll deal by telephone, and they can call us anytime they want. Again, we have all the cards. They have no military left, practically. They have no leaders left. We don't know who the leaders are. Nobody knows who the leader. I don't think they know who the leaders are, very importantly.
What point do you send Witkoff and Kushner and send Vice President Vanson? What point are you going to be ready?
They're all very competent, all three. Those are three good. But they weren't meeting with the leader of the country. They were meeting with other people. And I said, we're just not going to do it. Too much traveling, takes too long, too expensive. I'm a very cost-conscious person.
Remember, Washington has demanded that Iran halt uranium enrichment for at least 10 years and move its existing stockpile out of the country. Now, under the new two-stage proposal, Iran suggests first extending the ceasefire or reaching a permanent end to the war, reopening the Strait of Hormuz and lifting the U.S. blockade. The White House has reportedly received the offer, though it remains unclear whether Washington will consider it. In a further escalation of the diplomatic standoff, Iran has now ruled out fresh negotiations with the United States as long as economic and logistical restrictions remain in place. Now, President Masoud Pezeshkian said Tehran will not return to the negotiating table while Washington continues what he described as a blockade on Iranian ports. Now, during a phone call with Pakistan Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, Pezeshkian said the U.S. must first remove operational obstacles, including the blockade, before any new rounds of talks can begin. And in a fresh diplomatic push, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi returned to Islamabad on Sunday as Pakistan's political and military leadership stepped up efforts to revive ceasefire talks between Tehran and the US. Remember, this was Araghchi's second visit to Islamabad in 2 days. Araghchi had left Islamabad late Saturday, causing confusion over a possible second round of talks. But Iranian state media said he returned before heading onward to Moscow. He had also been in Oman, which previously mediated negotiations and lies across the strategic Strait of Hormuz. Now remember, US President Donald Trump last week indefinitely extended the ceasefire agreed on April 7th between Washington and Tehran, which has largely paused fighting that began after joint US-Israeli strikes on February 28th. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has called the US-Israeli war with Iran totally unnecessary, warning that its geopolitical shockwaves are now impacting energy markets, even in the United States. Now, speaking after returning from an informal European Union summit in Cyprus, Merz said Europe must act collectively to confront growing global challenges. He stressed that if Europe fails, Germany will fail too.
In der letzten Nacht spät aus Zypern zurückgekommen. Warum? Weil wir mit den 27 Staats- und Regierungschefs der Europäischen Union 2 Tage zusammengesessen haben, um über die Bewältigung der großen Herausforderungen zu beraten, die vor uns liegen, im Iran, mit dem Iran-Konflikt, mit diesem vollkommen unnötigen Krieg dort, mit vielen anderen Herausforderungen, die wir zu tun haben. Wir lösen die Probleme nicht allein. Wir lösen sie nur zusammen mit Europa. Und wenn Europa scheitert, scheitert auch Deutschland, meine Damen und Herren.
And hundreds of Israelis joined an anti-government rally in Tel Aviv as Iran and the United States appear to lose momentum. Protesters voiced anger over the handling of the conflict and growing uncertainty over a lasting peace deal. Demonstrators opposed the war, with Iran arguing it had only worsened the situation and failed to bring any meaningful settlement closer. Now, although a ceasefire is currently in place, the war has pushed energy prices to multi-year highs, added on inflation concerns, and cast a shadow over global growth prospects.
We are also opposing the war in Iran because we think it's just made everything just worse. It didn't advance us anywhere towards a settlement, and therefore we are here.
It's like we are in a ceasefire, and every time we can go back to a war. And in other hand, it's like our government is not really taking part in these negotiations. So we are talking about our security and the security of the area, but we are not really making the decisions. And it's also a sensation that they want us to live in a chaos and not really know what it's happened. I think that part of this demonstration is to really say we want to live in a country that wants peace and wants political solutions.
With that, let's slip into a quick commercial break. When we come back, we tell you why India and how India is at the epicenter of a global heat wave, with mercury expected to touch 45 degrees Celsius. 95 out of the 100 hottest cities in the world are in India. Also on the show coming up, Mohit Gang will be here to tell us, are investors fighting a losing battle against FY27 guidance? Crude at $106 a barrel and FII exiters. We'll bring you that and more. You are watching Morning Brief at 9.
कहीं एक नई रोड ने साइंस को शहर से गांव तक पहुंचाया, ताकि पूर्णी चांद तक पहुंचने का सपना देख पाए। देश के नंबर 1 सीमेंट अल्ट्राटेक में हम मानते हैं, बनेगा तो बढ़ेगा इंडिया।
Bhaskar, our first order. Help us build the chutney business from label to website.
Others see a teenage tantrum. I see you standing your ground. I see you, my daughter, 16 and already owning your story. And I couldn't be more proud. For you, only natural diamonds.
पढ़ता है, खेलता है, झूलता उछलता है, दौड़ता कभी कभी दौड़ कराता है, आगे आगे बढ़ता है इंडिया, अमूल दूध पीता है इंडिया।
Welcome back. You're watching Newsline. This is Morning Brief at 9. Well, the United States has announced a steep preliminary anti-dumping duty of 123% on solar cells and modules imported from India, dealing yet another blow to Indian exporters, targeting one of the world's largest renewable energy markets. Now, the move is expected to further restrict shipments, although industry players say many companies have already diversified away from the US market. Now, the decision adds to the existing countervailing duties of more than 125%, taking the combined tariff burden to over 200%. Now, industry experts say such a tariff structure effectively makes Indian solar exports to the US commercially unviable. Now, India's solar sector has strongly criticized the findings. The National Solar Energy Federation of India CEO said the investigation appeared fundamentally flawed and lacked logical basis. He added that the Federation has begun filing a formal representation to challenge the ruling. Indian Solar Manufacturers Association Secretary General Amit Manohar said the industry would contest the decision through final determinations and related proceedings, while remaining hopeful of a better outcome. And back home, mercury is rising and it seems to be an unprecedented heat wave in the month of April. That's right, India is in the grip of a severe heat wave with 95 of the world's 100 hottest cities currently located in the country. Temperatures have crossed 40 degrees Celsius in many regions, while some areas are nearing the 45 degrees Celsius, marking India the epicenter of the broader global heat surge. Now, the intense heat is being felt across north, central and eastern India, with rising concern over increasingly harsh pre-summer conditions. The Indian Met Department has warned that heat wave conditions are likely to continue over northwest and central India for the next 3 days, with slight relief expected afterwards. According to the IMD, severe heatwave conditions have been reported in isolated parts of Himachal Pradesh, while heatwave conditions are prevailing in areas of Haryana, Delhi and Uttar Pradesh. Similar conditions are also likely in Jammu and Kashmir, Punjab and parts of Rajasthan. And from the heat to the taking the heat off from the stock markets, a stalemate, so to speak, on the negotiations between US and Iran is keeping market mood a little uncertain. Let's put up Asia first, which opens ahead of India, and look at how markets are faring this morning. Well, some relief seems to be stemming in from across Asia, and this seems particularly visible in South Korea's Kospi, and that index is up 2.25 percentage points this morning. Japan's Nikkei 225 also recovering most of its losses, up about 1.5% or so. Meanwhile, Taiwan's TAIEX is up more than 2.5% in trade. Part upswing one can see, or rather a gap up, in Hong Kong's Hang Seng and the Shanghai Composite Index. But overall, Asia seems to be in the green territory this morning. Let's pull up the Indian charts as well and take a look at how the Indian stock markets are faring this morning. And it pretty much seems to be a similar sort of impact visible even on the Indian indices, with the Sensex and the Nifty both up more than 0.5 percentage point each. In fact, Sensex is up more than 400 points in early trade, but still at levels just about near the 77,000 mark. Meanwhile, Nifty 50 is also up about 120 points or so at levels just a little higher than the 24,000 mark. Meanwhile, volatility in the Indian markets is down by about 2%, but still close to levels above 19, in fact closer to 20, as we can see on the charts. Meanwhile, the Nifty small cap and the mid cap indices are performing better than the benchmark, up more than 1% each. Let's pull up the Nifty 50 heat map and try and see which are the sectors and which are the stocks specifically which are showing some momentum this morning. Well, expectedly, Axis Bank is down about 4% or so. Reliance Industries, despite declaring a 9% drop in net profits, is holding par, in fact almost flat, but positive by about 0.11% or so in trade this morning. Meanwhile, also good news coming in from Sun Pharma after it decided to acquire a US listed pharma company. That stock is up about 5% or so in trade, and some bottom fishing seen in the IT space, particularly Infosys and Wipro, both performing well this morning. Some buying action visible. Well, Mohit Gang, co-founder and CEO of Moneyfront, joins us this morning. Good morning, Mohit. Pleasure having you here with us back on News 9. Let's just look at the charts this morning and begin perhaps first with the IT sector and India's IT sector. In fact, the Nifty IT has faced the worst weekly drop since March 2020. That is last week I'm talking about, with very weak FY27 guidance and, of course, AI headwinds. What do you make of the IT sector, and what are we seeing on the charts today? Is this some sort of a bottom fishing that is visible on the stock prices?
Hi, Karthik. Morning. Always a pleasure to be on your show. Look, I think bottom fishing is for brave-hearted, to be very honest. I think IT in India is really struggling to cope up with the global pressures, with the global AI giant and the overall AI tsunami which is sweeping the globe. Till such time that you find resemblance of the IT stocks settling with the new world model, I think it's very difficult to take a call. Yes, technically you can say that they have corrected a lot, and perhaps, as I said, the brave-hearted could just do some bottom fishing, could dip a little bit, touch your toe and feel the depth, right? But you can't get into the ocean with both your feet right? Because you never know where the bottom is, given the new equilibrium which is sweeping the world. You never know what will be the earnings like 2 years, 3 years down the line. IT is the biggest employment sector in the country. Almost 8 million odd people dependent on IT services. So it's not just IT per se, it's the cascading effect in terms of the earning power or the purchasing power of these 8 million odd people getting eroded, the impact on real estate, the impact on lifestyle segments, consumption, so on and so forth. So there are many other things which are the second order impact of this IT thing, right? So my sense is we should just wait for the things to settle down. Unless IT index per se gives you a meaningful bounce of around 5-10 odd % and kind of stabilizes at that level, that's when you can start looking at it. Also, I think the interest rate scenario globally is not a favorable thing for the IT pack itself. Whenever you see the interest rate scenario is in a rising cycle or in an up cycle, the IT stocks don't fare well. And till about 6 months back, the scenario was that the interest rate scenario will ease off. But given the West Asia conflict and the energy prices going up globally, I don't think so the interest rates are coming down in a hurry now. In fact, they might just not come down but go up, right? So that also doesn't go well with the entire IT pack. So my sense is it's a wait and watch still. Yes, these are very attractive and tempting levels given the cash which sits on the balance sheets of most of these IT companies, but the results have not been encouraging, plus the headwinds are not very encouraging. So my sense is to stay on the shorts, dip your toe if you really are brave-hearted, but as of now, it's not the time to take a full dip in this.
All right. And on a day like this, where there is some sort of a rise that we are seeing in IT stocks, would you also suggest that in case people are sitting on profits, this might be the time to use the opportunity and get out of IT stocks?
Look, you will be sitting on profits only if you are like a 5-year-old investor or a decade-old investor, Karthik, honestly. Yeah. At that point in time, if you really want to shave something off, perhaps, yes, maybe you can. But my sense is taking off at these levels also doesn't make sense. I see technically the sector is facing strong amount of, or the index is facing strong amount of, support at these levels. Mm-hmm. So I would still wait and watch it out. I'll not sell at these levels if I'm holding.
All right, so wait and watch seems to be the word. Meanwhile, let's move on now to Reliance Industries, which did report on Friday a 9% drop in Q4 net profit and has announced a dividend of 6 rupees per share. No concrete news really on the Jio IPO, though there was a line that mentioned that the work is on and is underway for Jio IPO soon. So overall, what do you make of Reliance Industries? Also, one would have expected that this drop in profit would have eaten into the valuations this morning. But in fact, we are seeing, Reliance has come a little in the negative this morning, but otherwise we were seeing Reliance did start off the day, it started flat, not really with losses, but we are seeing some cuts coming in right now.
Right. So look, I think the weak energy margins have had its impact, and I think which was pretty well known by the street. So it's not something which wasn't known by the street that the weak energy margins would kind of have an impact. Plus, there are ongoing cost pressures, right? So it's all negatively impacted the overall profitability of the company. But I think given the other pieces, if you see the other income and all those things, I think they pretty much cover up for the revenue part. In fact, the revenues are up, if I'm not wrong, right? So my sense is street continues to believe that this is a stock where a lot of value will unlock over a period of time, and because of obviously the Jio listing and so on and so forth. So my sense is, yes, it's a stock which hasn't delivered much of late, but for holders of the stock and for believers of the stock, I think there's a lot to be unlocked in terms of the parts and pieces of the overall company.
All right, and let's move on now to Adani Energy Solutions, another stock in focus this morning. 22,000 crore rupees of capex announced for FY27, but we are seeing the stock is actually down by more than 1% or so in trade this morning. Investors not very bullish on that additional capex of 22,000 crore rupees, and also we are seeing in line with that, Adani Green is also down about 1.8%. Could this be the fact that the US is looking at adding that 123% anti-dumping duty on India's renewable exports to the US?
Perhaps, Karthik, I don't have a very concrete view on this pack. Honestly, I think there are a lot of things which kind of impact the overall prices on the overall Adani group. it's sometimes more political and sometimes more fundamental, right? So from a fundamental point of view, I think the stocks look pretty decent and pretty good to go. Plus minus here and there because of some news. Yes, I think that can happen at any point in time. But investors just have to be beware of the overall implications in terms of that these are also politically sensitive stocks.
Politically sensitive stocks as well. Meanwhile, let's move on now to Paytm. 197 communications shares are under pressure following RBI's cancellation of the payments bank license. Of course, this story has been on for a little over 2 years or so now, but finally, the fact that that Paytm's payment bank license stands cancelled. Is this pretty much a closure of all that we have seen over the last 2 years, and it's time for 197 Communication to now potentially focus on other revenue streams and just forget about the payment bank business as a whole?
Oh, I think yes. I think it's been a long going saga, and again, there's nothing much which the market wasn't aware of, but yes, maybe there was a lot of capital which is still lying locked in the payments bank, and potentially how does that capital come out? And obviously, it was also contributing a lot to the overall EBITDA numbers of Paytm when it was functional. But now there is a complete permanent lid on the chapter. So it's for Paytm now to turn the new leaf and move forward with whatever parts and pieces they're left out with.
All right. And finally, let's move on also to Sun Pharma, which has signed a definitive agreement to buy the US-listed Organon for $12 billion. And the stock, of course, is performing reasonably well this morning. In fact, it was up about 5% or so in trade. Overall, how do you see the pharma sector, and particularly Sun Pharma? This stock, continues to outperform at least its peers and is up about 3.5% or so in trade this morning.
Karthik, I think that's a pretty audacious move which the company has taken. Honestly, I think it's sometimes about the audacity of your ambition, and Sun Pharma going out in US acquiring an equally powerful and an equally big company, right? So there is nothing much give or take between the two companies. Even in terms of operations, if you see, I think Organon operates in much larger global footprint than what Sun Pharma also does. So it'll be a difficult integration, honestly. Because it's a marriage of equals. Number two, they will have to take CCI approvals in multiple countries to be really operational, and then there are those integration issues which are very well known, right? But Sun Pharma has a track record of going out, acquiring companies and successfully integrating them within the ecosystem. So hopefully this time around it's a pretty large one, but given their track record around execution, we're pretty hopeful. This should be EPS accretive in the long run. In the immediate, again, as I said, these are very difficult calls to take in terms of how long will does this take, what is the overall cost impact, and so on and so forth, and plus the people impact and the HR impact of this entire thing. Those are very difficult things to measure, but in the long run, it's EPS accretive, and will open up a lot of possibilities for Sun Pharma and multiple other sectors also, especially around biosimilars and those kind of things, right? On the overall pharma pack, Karthik, we remain extremely bullish and positive. I think that's one stage, one sector which is seeing action galore, right? If you see the maximum amount of PE activity, the maximum amount of capex building is happening in that sector. In fact, if you see the overall, the broader sector, which is the healthcare, diagnostics, hospitals, and all those kind of things, they have seen a big fillip. A lot of capex has gone into hospital chains and other things, which my sense is the companies will reap benefit in the coming in this year and coming next year. Overall, the pharma space is one to watch out for, and we remain positively bullish on that.
All right, positively bullish on the pharma space. Now, away from stock-specific analysis, let's move on to what really is happening in the world, the issues which investors are grappling with. And in that context, Mohit, where do you see, the markets heading, not just by the end of this quarter, but maybe this calendar year, if not the financial year? Because right now, of course, the stalemate in West Asia continues. Crude continues to be above that $106 a barrel. The Indian rupee, despite all that the RBI has tried to do is continuing to weaken against the US dollar. In fact, it's down to about 94.20 against the USD. Of course, there are fears about inflation coming and hitting Indian shores as well. And this is going to be supply side imported inflation. And then, of course, the massive outflows on account of FIIs. In fact, some estimates suggest that as much as 1.75 lakh crore rupees have exited Indian equities as far as FIIs are concerned in 2026 alone. So given the overall geo-economic sort of political landscape as well as everything that you're seeing with the energy markets, where do you realistically see markets headed from here on?
Karthik, truth be told, it's very difficult to call out if markets will be heading anywhere at all. Look, I think you've put out all the numbers out there, which doesn't augur for a very good story on the Indian markets. Look, immediate triggers to me, if I were to call, other than what you have already put out, is the result of the assembly election on 4th of May. In fact, I think 29th is the last day of polling, and exit polls will give you some amount of picture. My sense is, if we see the ruling party getting into a majority, at least in Bengal, then perhaps you might get a small rally in the market, which could be a good rally for people to encash or take some profits off the table. Right, that's the absolute immediate view. For a quarter, honestly, I don't think so any much changing, whether globally or in India. In fact, the impact of the energy prices will start trickling on to consumers and to you and me now. Post the elections, my sense is that the prices of oil, LPG, everything will go up, because the government has been holding on the lid for a pretty long while now, and it's not possible that globally everything is going up in terms of energy prices and India stands alone without any impact. Right, so I think those things will trigger off, which will have a serious impact on inflation. Monsoon doesn't look pretty well this year. There is a extreme heat wave in the country, right? So the macros aren't looking pretty rosy. So from a quarter's perspective, I don't see any meaningful move in the market. I don't see it breaking also below 22,000, which to me is a very strong and a stiff resistance. And making a new high is absolutely not the call right now. From a year's perspective, yes, I think earnings will take precedence. My sense is even if Nifty were to deliver around a 10% earnings growth, we should see market giving that from these levels, but that's not significant enough. But yeah, I think that's pretty much what we can expect from markets for this financial year.
All right, so expect the unexpected, expect uncertainty to continue, and of course, can't really put a finger on what direction markets are going to take, not just for this quarter, but even for the year. Well, let's leave it at that. Mohit Gang, always a pleasure having you here with us on News 9. Thank you so much for your time. And with that, we will slip into another short break. A lot more coming up on the other side. You are watching News 9.
Water overflowing, what could it be?
Walk down Cool Street. When you're hot, we'll cool you down on Cool Street. On Cool Street. On Cool Street. Ooh, I'm cool. Chill your bill. I'm cool. Chill your bill.
I'm cool. Chill your bill.
In Kerala, politics turns tense yet again.
Kadalvindi Makalakka Namaskaram.
Can fate in Sabrimala torpedo politics? Will corruption allegations decide the mandate?
LDF leadership is corrupt. BJP and LDF are joined together.
From the ground, the questions that matter. The voices that shape the vote. India votes. Only on News 9.
Back, you are watching News 9. This is Morning Brief at 9. A dramatic security scare at one of Washington's most high-profile events. U.S. President Donald Trump and First Lady Melania Trump were rushed out of the White House Correspondents' Dinner over the weekend after an armed man attempted to breach security. Shots were fired as Secret Service agents moved quickly to neutralize the suspect. who had charged a checkpoint near the venue. Now, the annual White House Correspondents' Dinner held at the Washington Hilton was attended by senior officials, journalists and hundreds of guests, with scenes of panic as soon as gunshots were heard. Authorities say the suspect accused of writing an anti-Christian manifesto was detained at the scene and is believed to be a 31-year-old man named Cole Thomas Allen from California. Now, one security officer was shot during the incident but survived due to protective gear. US President Donald Trump later described the attacker as a would-be assassin and praised the rapid response of the US security forces. Listen in.
A man charged a security checkpoint armed with multiple weapons, and he was taken down by some very brave members of Secret Service, and they acted very quickly and have just released, for purposes of transparency, clarity, I've ordered it to be put out. You probably have it by now. Put out on Truth and put out on many other platforms. A tape showing the violence of this thug that attacked our Constitution, and also showing how quickly Secret Service and law enforcement acted on our country's behalf. Really did a great job. One officer was shot, but saved by the fact that he was wearing obviously a very good bulletproof vest. He was shot from very close distance with a very powerful gun, and the vest did the job. I just spoke to the officer, and he's doing great. He's in great shape. The man has been captured. They're going to his apartment. I guess he lives in California, and he's a sick person, a very sick person.
And a potential assassination attempt of US President Donald Trump was stopped short thanks to multiple layers of security in Washington. Remember, an armed suspect was intercepted at the checkpoint outside the White House Correspondents' Dinner before he could get anywhere near the US president. Security analysts are of the view that White House dinner shooter was stopped by established security layers, adding that Trump was never in any imminent danger. Listen to former US Secret Service Special Agent.
Quite frankly, I don't believe that he was able to get that close. I've been in that hotel. That's the infamous hotel where Reagan was shot in 1981. The United States Secret Service knows that hotel very well. They've set up this layer of security in the security plan for decades now. And I think that last night's security plan went according to the way it was supposed to. Again, I don't think that he was ever in any imminent danger. I think where we could probably do better, even 2 weeks ago, I learned that the president was going to be attending the Correspondents' Dinner. I would say that would really be my only negative feedback, is that perhaps the president's movements should not be broadcast.
Panic and confusion spread at Washington's annual White House Correspondents' Dinner after shots rang out late Saturday night. Now, witnesses describe a chaotic scene as Secret Service agents rushed towards the stage where President Donald Trump was seated. Guests, meanwhile, scrambled for cover, diving under tables, and glass shattered and silverware clattered across the ballroom floor. Listen in to some of the reactions from Ground Zero.
We're sitting actually very close to that stage, and so you would just hear the ruffle of silverware and glasses start shattering, and it almost seemed like a stampede was running towards the president's table. We then had this very surreal scene where we were told that President Trump was going to be giving a press briefing down the road about a mile away at the White House. And so me and others started hopping on bikes, and other people were running all the way to the White House because the roads were completely shut down because the president and these top-level officials were trying to leave this area when we were told that the dinner was no longer going to continue.
It was the most eventful White House Correspondents' Dinner I have ever been. I'm sure that's the case for everybody else.
And the security scare is now feeding into a legal battle over reconstruction plans at the White House. The U.S. Justice Department has urged that a lawsuit preventing the construction of Donald Trump's proposed White House ballroom be dropped for security reasons. In a letter, the department argued the lawsuit poses a security risk, especially after the recent shooting incident at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, where President Trump and First Lady Melania Trump had to be evacuated by the security services. The administration now says a new ballroom inside the White House complex would eliminate the need for the president to attend large events at external venues, but the project remains tied up in court. A federal judge has already ruled the construction unlawful, saying the administration overstepped its authority by moving ahead without congressional approval. The lawsuit filed by the National Trust for Historic Preservation argues the plan involved demolishing parts of the historic East Wing to build a 90,000 square foot ballroom funded by corporate donors. Now, the case now sits at the intersection of security concerns, presidential powers and preservation of historic institutions. Meanwhile, US President Donald Trump said the Justice Department's investigation into Fed Chair Jerome Powell is not dropped, contradicting earlier remarks that the probe had been closed. The investigation centers on cost overruns in the Federal Reserve's Washington headquarters renovation, as well as Powell's past statements to Congress on the project. Now, the Fed renovation budget has now climbed to over $2.4 billion, significantly higher than initial estimates, driven largely by rising material and labor costs.
Do you agree with the decision by Jeanine Pirro to drop the investigation into Jerome Powell?
Well, I want to find out. It's not dropped. They're looking into the whole thing about the cost. Look, we have a railroad under construction in California. That's the worst thing I've ever seen under Gavin Newsom. And I want to find out why that one is costing 20 times what it was projected to cost. Likewise, the Fed building is a small. I built a hotel in Washington. It's a Waldorf Astoria. I built it for $201 million. And I believe it's bigger than the Fed building. And you have bathrooms, you have a lot of, it's much tougher, much more expensive to build a hotel than an office. I want to find out, how can a building of that size cost for whatever it's going to be? Nobody knows, by the way, what it's going to be. Kevin is going to be fantastic. Kevin Warsh, he may never get to be in that building.
Going on now, trade talks between the US and Europe are gaining momentum with steel tariffs back in focus. European Trade Commissioner Maros Sefcovic said discussions with US Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick moved in a positive direction, with both sides agreeing to speed up talks on steel and related products.
Critical minerals, as you know, are at the core of every industry shaping the future. So with Secretary Howard Lutnick, we discussed the practical way forward. First, to map the tools we have already at our disposal to support the project. Second, to identify how best to deploy those tools, ideally together, for instance, through co-investing for greater impact. As a next step, we want to launch work with the US on steel ring fencing, aligning our approaches towards the third countries, and with Secretary Lutnick we agreed to accelerate this work at technical level. I also welcome that immediately after our meeting the teams began detailed technical discussion on steel derivatives. With Secretary Bessent, we discussed our cooperation on economic security and in particular ways to jointly strengthen our supply chains and reduce existing external dependencies.
On to stories from corporate America now. US FMCG giant Procter & Gamble says it expects a roughly $1 billion hit to profits as surging oil prices drive up costs across its businesses. Now, the baker of brands like Pampers and Tide says higher crude prices, jumping from around $60 to nearly $100 a barrel, are pushing up packaging, raw material and transportation expenses. The warning makes P&G one of the hardest hit companies outside the aviation sector, highlighting how deeply energy costs are feeding into the global economy.
Procter & Gamble on Friday warned of a roughly $1 billion hit to its profit over its next fiscal year due to surging oil prices. That's among the highest profit losses for any company due to the Iran war outside of airlines, which rely heavily on oil for fuel. P&G's estimated profit hit, projected for its fiscal year starting in July, accounts for oil prices jumping from $60 a barrel before the Middle East conflict to around $100 today. The consumer goods giant said that will impact plastics and paper for packaging, as well as transportation charges. While P&G on a post-earnings call said it was well-placed to manage the challenges, the company's finance chief noted that, quote, $1 billion after tax is nothing to sneeze at from a headwind standpoint. The company is the latest to join a host of global firms flagging significant cost pressures from the Iran war. European rival Nestle has warned of higher costs due to the Strait of Hormuz blockade, while Beiersdorf, maker of Nivea, is considering price hikes later this year if commodity costs continue to rise. A Reuters review of statements from 172 companies since the start of the Iran war showed 24 of them have either withdrawn or cut their outlook, while 35 have signaled price hikes, and another 35 companies have warned of a financial hit from the conflict. As for P&G's quarterly results, the company did beat sales and earnings estimates, sending its shares up as much as 5% in Friday trading.
Ukraine is marking a somber milestone, 40 years since the Chernobyl disaster, the world's worst nuclear accident. Commemorations come at a time of renewed anxiety as Russia's ongoing war raises fears about nuclear safety in the region. The 1986 disaster killed thousands and left lasting environmental damage, and officials warn the risks of a similar catastrophe cannot be ignored amid continued conflict. Here's a look at how Ukraine is remembering the tragedy and the concerns it faces today.
A tolling bell in northern Ukraine began a series of ceremonies marking 40 years since the deadly Chernobyl nuclear meltdown. The anniversary on Sunday came amid lingering fears that Russia's ongoing war could spark a repeat of the world's worst nuclear disaster. Millions were exposed to radiation, hundreds of thousands forced to flee, and large stretches of land contaminated after an accidental explosion at the Soviet-built plant on April 26, 1986. In Kyiv, Ukrainian officials and so-called liquidators gathered at a memorial. Hundreds of thousands of liquidators were sent in to the nuclear plant to clean up after the blast as Soviet authorities tried to hide the scale of the disaster. One of them, Serhiy Balashov, said Soviet officials also refused to acknowledge links between the cleaners' illnesses and them cleaning up in Chernobyl. 31 plant workers and firemen died in the immediate aftermath, mostly from acute radiation sickness. Thousands of others have since succumbed to radiation-related illnesses such as cancer, although the total death toll and long-term health effects remain a subject of intense debate. Marking the disaster, which spewed radioactive material across much of Europe, has taken on sharp new meaning as Russia invades its smaller neighbor. Kyiv says Moscow has repeatedly sent missiles and drones near the plant during attacks on Ukrainian cities. A Russian drone strike damaged a critical protective shield in February last year, officials said. The steel and concrete arch was installed with international effort in 2016 to shield the original sarcophagus, hurriedly built in 1986 to cover tons of radioactive debris. No leaks were detected, but more than $580 million worth of repairs are needed, according to the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. After meeting Ukraine's energy minister on Sunday, International Atomic Energy Agency chief Rafael Grossi said repairs need to start as soon as possible.
Leaving the situation as is now is problematic.
Control of the Russian-occupied Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant is also a major sticking point in US-brokered peace talks between Kyiv and Moscow. Speaking in the Ukrainian capital on Sunday, President Volodymyr Zelensky said the station risks a disaster worse than Chernobyl if it was not transferred back to Ukrainian control.
And finally, from the Iran conflict and the fate of the Strait of Hormuz to a crucial U.S. Federal Reserve decision and a big week of big tech earnings. It's said to be a packed week for global markets. Here's a quick brief on all the important business stories to watch this week.
From volatility in Iran to a mega earnings week, these are the stories to watch in business and finance in the coming week. Will progress be made on reopening the Strait of Hormuz? That's the question that continues to dominate amid some relief of ceasefires being extended. Diplomacy, any sign of back-channel talks, and social media posts from both the US president and Iran's supreme leader will all continue to drive volatility. The Federal Reserve is expected to keep US interest rates steady on Wednesday. That means it will mostly be about its signals for the months ahead, given most economists think cuts are off the table for now. An intriguing subplot is whether this will be Jerome Powell's last meeting in charge. The 73-year-old's term as Fed chair is due to end next month. Also, first quarter GDP and the personal consumption expenditures price index for March are both due out on Thursday. Reports from 5 of the Magnificent 7 mega-cap companies headline a deluge of first quarter earnings next week. It comes at a time when almost unshakable investor optimism about AI-driven profits is providing critical support for near-record high equity indexes. On Wednesday, reports are due from Alphabet, Microsoft, Amazon, and Meta, followed by Apple on Thursday. It's not just tech, though. More than a third of the S&P 500 are reporting next week, including weight loss drug maker Eli Lilly, oil major ExxonMobil, and credit card giant Visa.
And that's all we have for you on this edition of Morning Brief at 9. Thank you so much for watching, but news continues right here on News 9, so stay tuned.